Acton Academy at Serenbe is a unique learning environment where students are empowered to take the reins of their education. Based loosely on a Montessori model, Acton classrooms combine multiple age groups, and teachers act much more like guides than lecturers, and students move at their own pace. The school has blossomed from just 34 students a few years ago to over 200 today. In fact, Acton recently began construction on a new campus in Mado that will be home to an organic farm, an artist studio for the entire community, and they've set the ambitious goal of having a carbon negative footprint. This incredible growth would not be possible without our guest today, John Mattis, a Serenbe resident and board chair of Acton Academy. Today, Steve and I talked to John about how he and his family first discovered Serenbe, Acton's student-driven model, and what's next for our community school.
If we do this right, we can be a shining example of how you should build schools going forward. The more students and more exposure on a long-term basis that someone has to this type of environment, it's going to impact how they make their decisions, regardless of what career they go into in life. So lots of exposure, lots of education, lots of information is the basis for educating our students in greater community. And we feel like this campus can set that tone and create an example.
Well, hello, and welcome back to Serenbe Stories. We have John Mattis here today, who is the chairman of the board of Acton Academy at Serenbe, as well as a resident. And of course, we've got Steve Nygren as usual. How are both of you?
Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, doing great here. Thank you.
John, you have been a longtime resident at Serenbe. Your wife and your kids all live here, but you've also taken on a pretty important role over the past, 4 or 5 years, maybe more, with the school. So we want to talk about all that today, but always our first question that we ask everybody is, how did you first hear about Serenbe and what prompted you to make the move?
Well, it's probably like a lot of people who came down here for an event. One of my neighbors selected Serenbe to get married, came down and stayed at the inn and attended a beautiful wedding. And my wife just made the suggestion of, let's just swing by the real estate office for kicks just to see what this is about. And that was kind of the hook. Fortunately, I have some flexibility in my career that I could work remotely, and this kind of worked out for us.
Amazing. This is the pre-COVID, though, flexibility. So When did you guys move down? It's been quite a while.
Yeah, so we've been here 11 years. The community was quite a bit smaller as far as size of homes, but had a tremendous sense of community, which was one of the main reasons we were drawn here. And we really fell in love with it right away. And we rented for a little bit just to make sure that the magic didn't rub off. And after about a year, we decided that we needed to find an architect and build a house because it was what we were looking for.
I love it. And you guys are in the Selborne neighborhood, which was the first neighborhood that got built. But You guys built a custom home, right?
We did. We joke that it's a historic Serenbe area. But we were able to work with an architect who's a resident in the community, who does a lot of work in the community, and the first house we ever designed and built. And we're really, really pleased with it.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. And many people know it because the dog that sits in front, right?
Yes. The mayor, as we call him. Our dog Huckleberry he's a greeter up and down Selborne Lane. So
yeah, he's got the invisible fence there.
That's right. I think he knows more people than we do.
Yeah, I love it. And your kids were how old when you moved here?
The oldest was 5 and the twins were 3. They were involved in the beginning of the Montessori school, which Kara, Steve's daughter, was involved in that. So we've been connected to the community and known that family for quite some time.
And it's such fun seeing all the kids grow up here. I mean, it's yours and several others. I was just really taken when we have these young girls, both graduated from high school this year. It's amazing to see that. And same with yours. Yours were babies when you got.
They really were. I remember walking them through the woods to the first school that was behind the Blue-Eyed Daisy. So it's really magical. I mean, walking out your door into the woods for about a quarter of a mile, cross a bridge, and then open the door to a classroom. I don't think you could paint it any better.
No, it was magical. And so since then, the Montessori has moved a few times and now has really grown into a whole grander model that really got paired with the Acton Academy model. Tell us a little bit about that and how you were drawn into it or roped in possibly, and what the storytelling is there.
Like all parents, they get very, very involved and have a lot of thoughts on their children's education. And Montessori has and is, in our mind, the greatest foundational education pedagogy there is. It's still a very, very strong part of our Acton campus, and we have it a pure Montessori model basically through 6 years of age. As the children develop beyond that, principles of follow the child are still in place, but we felt that there were other applications and more modern day learning tools that kind of made Montessori 2.0 more of a reality. So when we selected Acton, we did a national search for different pedagogies, and we felt that that adhered to the learner-driven model the most, but also changed the dynamic of, instead of digesting information, teaching our students how to learn, and then equipping them with the ability to go out, gather information. It's a great complement to that foundation.
Right. And our kids were in the Montessori as well, but can you tell just the listener just a quick blurb about Montessori and or how kids learn? And that starts at what age at Acton right now?
We have a Montessori studio serving students 3 to 6. Montessori runs in a 3-year cycle. So in addition to learning some core skills, there is a leadership and independence and self-learning measurement that is part of it. And as you mature through the different stages, the oldest students actually somewhat mentor the youngers. So there's a leadership component that is really important to prepare that child for the next stage in learning. It's very tactile. It's very thoughtful, and it's a 3-year cycle that really materializes after the completion of all 3 years. So it's not like a typical school where you would pop in 1 year and learn a certain skill, and then year 2, you do something else. It's really the culmination of all 3. And that's how all of our studios are set up in 3-year increments as well, all the way through high school, Launchpad. Except the Launchpad, the high school, is actually a 4-year studio.
So what drew you to Acton and what's sort of the history there? Because there's a lot of really interesting models. I think people couch them as like micro schools, more neighborhood schools. Why Acton?
And John, also, how many Acton were there when you first looked into it?
When we first started, I think we were the 60th maybe. I think there were 10,000 applicants to become an Acton school, if I'm not right. I'll double check that number. But Acton is actually a network of schools, a global network of schools. It actually is developed and managed or originated out of Austin, Texas. However, the majority of the content now comes from best practices from around the world. So it's truly a network of best practices. I think there are over 200 schools around the world now, and they're on track to continue to grow.
Wow. And how many kids were there in the beginning? Because I know it was pretty small.
Well, when I got involved and we sat around and I helped build out a board, I think we were at 34 students.
Wow.
And that was only, 3-4 years ago. When we bridged to Acton in 2018, we created a strategic plan working closely with Steve, discussing what education should look like, not just for our community of Serenbe, but the greater community of Chattahoochee Hills, and what we could do to create a learning environment that was best suited for our community and for our students. So we put a plan together, and we decided that we were going to go beyond the primary and beyond the elementary, beyond the middle, and all the way through high school, which takes us to our current strategic planning of the campus that's in place now. Within a few years, we hope to be close to 450 students.
Wow, 450. I didn't even realize it was going to be that big. And right now you guys are all the way through 10th grade. Is that correct? Serving kids in 10th grade?
That's correct. We will serve students from 7 weeks all the way through high school. So cradle to cap, basically. And we finished this past year at about 150 students, and we were looking at almost 200 enrolled for the fall.
Wow. And are you adding that 11th grade this year, or was this the 10th grade year?
Well, it really depends on the child. If somebody comes from another Acton that is a junior or senior, or somebody is equipped to join the studio, we can add any high schooler. It's a pretty rigorous review process to make sure that the family and the student is a good fit and complements our program.
Otherwise, you're going to just grow the students into those final 2 years, right?
Yeah, that's organic growth is where we have most of our momentum right now.
When somebody comes from, say, a more traditional school, right? I'm sitting at a desk and I'm in a room and the teacher's at the top. I mean, that's how I grew up at public school in California. What do you tell those parents? Like when they're asking, because as a parent, we have an idea in our head of what school's supposed to look like. And it's very different. It's very exciting. Like, what do you tell them that their kid's day is going to look like?
Well, Monica, I think you mentioned, you gave me the phrase, instead of having a sage on the stage, we have a guide on the side.
Yeah.
And the reason we focus on having a guide on the side is that oftentimes a traditional teacher, and by no means is this putting down a traditional school. This is just a different method of teaching. But oftentimes when you have a traditional teaching model, when the teacher is transferring their knowledge to the entire class, it's very difficult for that teacher to teach at the pace at which each individual child is learning. So our learning is tied directly to each person in that class. Everyone is moving at their own pace. We call our teachers guides because what they do is they actually monitor the goals that that student has set forth for that entire calendar year. Our student will come in and set a contract in place with their parent as to what they want to accomplish, and then schedule all the way back to every day as to what they want to do that day, that week, that month. And they set goals. We have a digital platform called Journey Tracker, which allows the guide to tap into what every student is doing and track every bit of work that they've done that day throughout the day, so that they can interject and say, hey, it looks like you're struggling with math. Have you talked to one of your peers? What resources have you tapped into? So that it's individualized, so that students can go really fast if they really got a subject, boom, boom, boom. Or if they're struggling, they can look to their peers or other mediums of education to get to those goals. But so much of the learning is learning how to self-manage and not looking for external validation, but figuring out how to work really hard so that when you get something done, you have yourself to thank.
Yeah. And is it true that this is in my head, so I may be doing storytelling, that if I was the kid and I wanted to finish all my math in the first quarter or the first month, like I could do that, my math for the year?
Sure. And we've had students that have finished math in 3 or 4 months into the year because it's easy to them. We have had students that have waited 3 or 4 months to even start their math because they love to read or write, or the books that they've selected for the year, they just want to go through those right away. But it's all about trusting a child to manage their schedule. And then if they don't, then there are certain consequences or measurements that they will have to live up to and set goals toward. And when they award themselves with completing a calendar year, let's say in math, they have the ability to go forward. They could go to the next grade if they want. They could go wider, which means that they could get a greater understanding of that particular subject, or they could go deeper in the sense that they could take that subject and apply it to a real world application, whether it's statistics or odds or game making or something like that. But that hour and a half that they normally would have spent on math, that's their free time for the rest of the year.
Wow. A couple other questions. This is super interesting. So do you guys have traditional homework, or because the child is very self-directed, they may or may not have work to do in the evening based on what they've completed that day? Or how does that work?
The goal is to have all the work completed during the day. And the way the programs are set up is all of our students have to achieve mastery to move forward. Mastery is the equivalent of an A. You can't just get by. Our programs will not let someone progress. So if someone makes it all the way through our program to graduation, they've effectively gotten straight A's the entire time.
And that's another great question. Are there grades? It's not really, it's proficiency.
So mastery, the only way to finish our program is to have straight A's, basically.
Okay.
The programs will actually measure your ability and capacity and performance and only promote you based on that. So hard work is core to what we do, and dedication and commitment from the student and the parents to trust the child to work through it and set the goals on their own.
And one more question before I want to dive into sort of the building a little bit. And I know Steve has a lot to share on that, is what do you do about Common Core? If you have a kid coming in from a public school from another state and they're coming into 4th grade, do you guys track against the Common Core? Or, and I'll state the Common Core just for the listener, is basically a way that public schools can be portable, if you will. So if I'm in Georgia and I move to California, 9th grade, generally we're teaching the same thing in history, math, and English. There's sort of this Common Core subjects and details that kids learn. But how do you guys track to that, or does it matter?
So in the Common Core, I'll break it into reading, writing, and arithmetic as the Common Core. Civilization, which is history and various other things we accomplish through our quests and various other things we do throughout the year. But the Common Core is tied directly to a grade level. So when a parent sets a goal for that year, let's say if a child is the grade level of 4th grade, it will be tied to what that Common Core is throughout the country. Now, having said that, we assess every child as they come in the door to figure out where they are. Now, that might mean a student is, even though they're in fourth grade from a public school, they may actually test as a third grade student. So what we do is we actually will rewind with that student into the third grade if they prove mastery in that subject, and then create a schedule to catch them up to where they need to be, and so on and so forth. And the same applies if they test ahead. They are a student that may be a fourth grade age, but we're actually tying their academics to where they are so that they can create a mastery path all the way through going forward.
Perfect. It truly, no child is left behind, which
that is the goal.
Key.
That is the goal. So one of the things I'll just touch on it briefly is that children reach different milestones at different times and progress at different rates and paces. The thing that's unique about us compared to another school is that we don't have to follow the guidelines and the structure in a traditional school. We give the children the ability and the freedom to catch up, move ahead, wherever they are. And since they have an individual path, the speed at which they can move forward is not reliant on the teacher teaching the next subject. As soon as they're ready for it, they just go. So it's so much more.
It's so great, especially kids who are so curious and want to learn more, who get bored in the classroom and then they start acting out. It gives them, they're really going to continue to learn, which is so cool. And I guess, and I said I was going to get to the building, but the other thing that's really cool that you guys do that I want to share is you really move them into sort of like, I'll call them internships, but you get them out into the community and they work with different people in the community. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So basically our school day is broken into two halves. The first half we would call the core skills, and the second half is what you call experiential learning. So the experiential learning are quests where they may focus on chess for 6 weeks or architecture for 6 weeks or biology for 6 weeks. And they actually participate in experiments and experiences that support that particular focus, all while reinforcing the core skills. They have to write about what they're doing. They have to do mathematical exercises. In the design of this school, during an architecture quest, we asked our students to design the perfect classroom.
Oh.
We gave them certain guidelines as far as what code required for the doors, the window heights, various things. And we asked for them to get out there with rulers so they understood what that looked like. And they all presented 3D models as to what the perfect classroom would look like. So we did that way back when we were first discussing the design of these classrooms, so that could be an important part of what we're doing.
That's amazing.
Really bring in the experts.
And it's so exciting. And then, John, what are some of the things you're doing, how you're building the school, and then how are the kids going to be involved on an ongoing basis?
We try to turn the school over to the students in the sense that we try to empower them to take pride in the school as they're an active participant in it. So on the campus, we were going to build an organic farm. And currently, our students are very, very fortunate within this community to visit the farm that we have on property, tour the creeks and the natural environment that we have. But the farm itself on the campus will be managed entirely by the students. The goal is that they are participating through composting, through soil preparation, through planting, harvesting, and all the way through market, taking the product to market. So it's going to be something that they take pride in. And based on the age level, will be an assignment of responsibility. So there'll be ownership pride, and they'll also teach them the value of time and investment based on what it takes and the challenges you experience as a farmer. It's a great platform and learning example for children to participate in.
So I'd love to hear both of you guys talk about the campus. I know Steve had visions of sort of what it could look like over there. It sits within our Mado neighborhood. And if anybody's seen pictures or visited, it is a very Scandinavian, European forward neighborhood architecture. And the most iconic probably piece is our pink pool, community pool building or swim club. And it's going right next to that. And Steve, maybe you want to kick off?
Yes, I'll lay the foundation on sort of an inspiration. And this really is through my travels in Scandinavia. I find that in America, we tend to be very serious about where we house our seniors and where we educate our children. And the color palette and shape of things is really the leader that sets that. Phil Tabb exposed me to a Scandinavian architect who's since dead, maybe been dead 20 years, but Erik Asmussen. And as the Scandinavians, they are simple form. Everything has to have function. But Mr. Asmussen, he had a lot of fun with shape and color, sort of took those things into extreme. And he has I suppose it's a school and probably about 40, 50 homes and a health clinic south of Stockholm called Järna. And we visited that, and that really gave me an inspiration of what we could do with the school and where we could house seniors. In our master plan, we, for the many reasons, have the school across the street from our Aging in Place campus. And it's Prom Field, which has a whole story and fun to it. And so all the buildings along Prom Field are to be inspired from the architect, Erik Rasmussen. So that's why the pool is the first building along that area, and it is pink and has some shapes and more shapes that are coming. And so we challenge the architects for the school to use that as a guide. And we've clearly, as John knows, we've had to push them into having these unusual shapes and tilting the roofs. And now the color palette is what you do not normally see in American schools. Now in Sweden, this isn't uncommon to see these kind of bright colors and what we're doing. So the whole fun, and it's fun when we talk about it, people start smiling. And so that's the whole idea. And so hopefully when people turn down that street, it's going to be such an interesting collage that it's a place you want to visit and a place that's going to bring joy and a smile to your face if you think about it, which is what we should have when we're looking at our kids and a new vision on how we can age in place for our elders.
I agree. It's been very exciting putting it together. And Phil Tab and Steve have been really, really helpful on the biophilic side, on the design, the orientation of the buildings. One of the things I'll add, we're so fortunate to be out in the nature in the Chattahoochee Hills community. We've actually created our classrooms to take advantage of that, in that almost every one of our classrooms has full-size garage doors that open up to additional learning space. So we want to create this open feeling to where everything orients out to the fields and the woods so that you're not confined to a desk, but have the ability to move and settle and learn in areas that best suit you, all while feeling the calm and the energy you're delivered from the natural environment.
There's a lot of environmental or sustainability aspects to it. As people who listen to the podcast know, Serenbe itself is an earthcraft community. All of our buildings, as well as commercial, are earthcraft. But tell us a little bit of where you're pursuing to go even further than sort of what we call earthcraft commercial or earthcraft commercial light. But you're also pursuing the Living Building Challenge. And that's a pretty interesting thing. Can you share a little bit about why you chose that to try and pursue and what that is?
When we started developing this school, we started looking at the assets of our community and the infrastructure and the thoughtfulness of our community. And Serenbe currently has a wastewater plan in place, excellent walking paths, excellent biophilic elements. We already build to earthcraft commercial light. So as we started going through this checklist, we started to realize that we have the majority of things that are already qualified for this Living Building Challenge. So we did a little bit of research, and we decided as a board that it was not only a nice thing to do, but an important thing to do on the education side. If we can create a campus by pursuing this Living Building Challenge that creates an environment where the students are aware of the energy generation, the water usage, building with the right materials that are sustainable, creating a welcoming environment to our community with access to art, and there's 7 different petals part of this. If we can capture all of those, we are not just creating an amazing learning environment for our students, but for everybody who visits that campus, adults, contractors, anybody who wants to create what a campus should look like. And if we do this right, we can be a shining example of how you should build schools going forward. The more students and more exposure on a long-term basis that someone has to this type of environment, it's going to impact how they make their decisions, regardless of what career they go into in life. So lots of exposure, lots of education, lots of information is the basis for educating our students in greater community. And we feel like this campus can set that tone and create an example.
And John, share some of the monitors and how you're going to get the kids involved on an ongoing basis to understand the kind of building and campus that they're in.
Our goal is to be at minimum generate 105% of our energy and then be a closed loop water system. So as the students come in, our goal is to have actual display monitors on the wall that show a trend of their power usage during the day, the water generation, the solar generation, So they learn to actually live within ranges of temperature or adjust their behavior based on what that looks like. So let's say it's an overcast day and a student is aware what kind of power generation might come in. They might say, well, hey, today's a good day to roll up the garage doors because we know we're not going to get a lot from the sun today. So we'll actually, seeing what they're doing, they'll be able to make behavioral decisions that impact their usage. And an ongoing basis will be subconscious in the sense. We'll also have practices aside from the solar generation, just on when we talk about the farm, composting. What do we do with our lunch when we're done with it? Well, we've got a plan for this. So we want them to be thoughtful in everything they do so that they're contributing to the usage of energy, water, and just how they're impacting their environment.
That's amazing. And you were saying, they'll open up these garage doors and they'll be able to go inside and out. Are there multiple buildings? Like, tell us a little bit about that, because it's not just one big building. That's also what I think is pretty cool. It's multiple.
Sure. So we're going to have a toddler building that will serve students from 7 weeks up to 3 years. We have a 8 classroom building, which will serve students from 3 all the way through 8th grade. And then we'll have a high school. The high school, the bottom part of the high school, which we haven't touched on, will be a 3,000 square foot maker space. Now, a maker space is a tactile learning environment where our students will be able to participate in laser cutting, digital printing, pottery, podcast rooms, whatever they want to create. But it's going to be very much of a hands-on production base where children can act outside the textbook and actually do things and then pursue their interests in a meaningful way.
Do I get to come and do a podcast with the kids?
Yes. Well, well, the utilization of the campus is a big part of what we want to do. Traditional schools stop at 3:00 and that building sits dormant. We want to create an environment where businesses come through on the weekends or in the evenings, or community members can come through and take classes at the pottery wheels or do woodworking. The more utilization we have of the space, the better impact it has on the environment because you don't have to create multiple spaces. So the goal is for this to enhance the entire community. And the gym is a really, really exciting part of what we're doing because it's not just a gym, it's a gym with a theater and an amphitheater outside. Steve and his team have been really helpful in positioning it on the site plan so that we can create something that I've never seen before, where we will actually be able to have an amphitheater that opens to a stage that opens to the inside of the gym. When we're at a point where we can share with the greater community, we will do so. But it's really, really exciting.
That's great. And you guys are phasing this. The toddler building is almost done.
Correct.
I mean, knock on wood, right?
Yeah.
But it depends on almost.
Well, to the lay person,
Yeah.
It's looking pretty done.
The goal is to have that completed this fall.
Okay, great. Perfect.
And it's such fun just to walk into that building that's framed and you see the small windows, the low windows, where my 3-year-old grandchildren can stand there and look out the window and it feels their size. And that's so empowering.
It's true. Some of the windows, you have to be their age to appreciate it, which is great. Yeah. It's very purpose driven.
That's so cool. A lot of fun. Steve, you were sharing with me that when you walk out of that taller building, there's a huge field that technically isn't still the campus, but that's the opportunity of being here, is that all the trails, all of Serenbe in a way is your campus. And so the kids will be able to flow out into that space and utilize it as well. Is that right?
Well, one thing I hate is in America, the way we put our children and our seniors in basically prisons. We call it fences. And, I was sorry to learn that there is school regulations regarding fences, and I understand that. So to sort of solve that feeling, in one of the meetings, I said to John, well, let's just move the fence to the forest. So it's not on your property, but let's just put it way clear over in the forest. And so there's no sense of a fence on the back of the school ground.
Yeah, you probably won't even see it from when you're sitting in the classroom. So yes, effectively the play space or the learning space almost triples in size based on that. So it's really amazing. And to answer your questions on the phasing, the gym and the primary 8 classroom building are next in line. So we expect those to start in a couple months for the primary and hopefully before the year end for the gym. So all of it's moving forward and it's very exciting.
It's thrilling. And so if kids or parents want to apply, where do we go?
Acton Academy at Serenbe.com. We are at capacity for a couple of our lower studios. The primary, we do have a little bit of space for some of the other studios, but As I mentioned before, fit is very important, and assessing where a child is very important. So we ask everybody to call and ask, because there may be a situation where there is room based on creating the correct classroom configuration of age and gender. And we're growing, right? So we may be full this year, but there may be a new classroom in the spring.
Exactly. And we're recording this in July, but it's probably going to come out this fall of 22. So just as a sense. Any other details, Steve or John, you want to share about it that are especially cool? I mean, the tree trunk detail is kind of neat in the toddler building.
Yeah, and pushing our architects, looking at everything, we want to reflect nature as we look at what we do. And so this has a great tilting roof that from certain angles, it's going to look like it's coming right out of the earth. We had to raise it so kids can't climb on it. We'd have kids all over the roof. And of course, that's planned to be solar. So not a good idea to have kids climbing up there. So when you come through the pasture to approach the school from the west, it literally looks like it's coming out of the ground. And then as it raises up to 20, 25 feet, I guess, it's supported by forms that are mimicking trees. So it's the shapes of the trees. And it's just going to have this really cool. So that's the first building in transition from the pastures and the woods into Mado and the school campus. So that's kind of the introductory building.
I love that. And it continues the woods into the building. I love that.
Yeah. So it's going to be great fun to see that all coming together.
Yep. And we have our students starting in that building being the youngest. And as you move up the hill, the students get older and older so to reach their pinnacle of the underschool education at high school.
I love
That's
it.
right. I hadn't thought about that. That is, they move right on up. So I think one of the most exciting things is, John, thank you for taking this role, and the people who've stepped forward, not all of them with children, to really contribute their time and energy and wisdom to pull this forward. And your fundraising was incredible, that a community stood up and raise those funds in a fraction of the time that you expected. And so I think it's just amazing that this community values education and this type of education to where they're willing to give their time and their money, even if they don't have kids here.
It's very true. It was really amazing. And we had an amazing team of people that came together to help out the school. I'm in awe. The generosity of time, commitment, and vision that they have to create something that not just doesn't benefit us locally, but down the road can set an example to hopefully impact schools around the country.
And John, you might want to share the scholarship program.
So our scholarship program is pretty amazing. And when we created this school, one of the things that was very, very important to myself and the board was that we did not want to create a school specifically for this community, but we wanted to capture all of the surrounding community, because we felt that a true community represents your society and your area and all the benefits of your greater community. And so what we've set aside, we have a goal that 25% of all the seats in our school are reserved for, we'll say, need-based families or families that could use a little bit of support. This has been a really, really successful program that is accomplished through participating in a state tax credit assignment. We've had a tremendous amount of success gathering funds for that. And then when we welcome a family in, we typically assign 3 years of education to them based on their need. So we're making a commitment to that family, not just to support them for this year, but for several years going forward. It's an amazing program, and we just hope that it will continue to grow so we can continue to welcome more and more families to participate in what we're building.
And for those listening and may not be aware, I mean, Serenbe is located in basically a rural area, even though we're on the edge and part of metropolitan Atlanta. And so this has been huge because education has not been great. And this offers really an opportunity for young families to stay in the area, many where they were raised, and education has forced many of them out. So this is exciting for the greater area and for various employees who are working in the various businesses around Serenbe that may drive in. And this is an opportunity for their children to actually go to school where they're working. It's just added so much in the mix of the student body and for the greater community.
Yes, and we have more information about that on our website if you want to research it, because it's a great program.
We'll add links in the show notes. I know that both of you have places to go, but I do want to ask our final question. Our final question sounds like a game show. We always ask the residents, what is it that you would share with visitors that are coming to Serenbe? Like, what would you tell them to do for the day? Or what's your favorite thing to go do?
Well, I wouldn't have to tell them relax, because the moment you drive in the neighborhood or just even get off the interstate, your shoulders slowly start to drop. I would say that just talk to people. Everybody's kind and welcoming, and they're happy to share their story. And I would ask them to be very intentional about what they see. Everything from the paths to things like parking, mailbox orientation, the layout of the roads. It creates a platform which developing community becomes very, very easy. I would also pay attention to when people talk to you. I'd be surprised if they asked you what you do for a living, but instead ask you what you like to do. People who have decided to live in this community are more interested in getting to know you as a person and your interests, and potentially how you might thrive in this community as well. And then I would also ask people to pay attention to how much people who live in this community give to the community and help create this community. We have everything from people stepping up to creating softball leagues, taking people on bird watching hikes, creating mountain biking groups. I mean, there's just so many people that are so passionate about connecting with people based on passion. It introduces something that I've never experienced before. Tell people to come with clear eyes and an inquisitive mind and get to know us in the community and what we're trying to accomplish.
That's great, John. I appreciate it. That's amazing. I'm like, be curious and look around.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're so excited to have you. We appreciate everything you're doing. We love having you as a neighbor, of course, but I mean, really stepping up to lead, just push forward education for a community school at Serenbe is amazing. And when I say community, I mean the larger community has been phenomenal. And we cannot wait for those buildings to be finished and to see that vision completed. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. And thank everybody.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, Steve.